Hey gang, how's it going? All's good? Awesome. That's great to hear. So while thinking up of a new video to post up for you guys, I put out a few weeks ago a questionnaire for everyone. Let's have an argument. If you were to discuss anything with anybody competitive, would a person be in the right if they had the most credentials? And credentials meaning most competitive tops, most won events. Would they always automatically be in the right of any discussion that you bring up? So it doesn't really matter if it's with Yu-Gi-Oh! Or with Vanguard, or even with Magic or Pokemon. This is a broad stroke, and hopefully we're able to learn a bit more about that today. So, with our first person, Ben, he'll be able to tell us his own point of view.
Not automatically. The meta is literally defined as what people are playing. Just because you have more tops doesn't mean you know what that is. If you only go to BCS and not to locals every week, you don't know what people are playing. If you top 8 at Worlds and don't follow Twitter, you don't know what people are playing. And he goes on further to say, I'm of the opinion that credentials should never be a factor in who's right. Being good at a game and winning a tournament is not a mutually dependent relationship. One implies the other, but you don't have to be good to win, and you don't have to win to be good. How many tops you should have shouldn't detract or add the quality of what you say. Someone who is wrong is wrong. Someone who is right is right. Let what they say speak for itself.
So, what we heard was a bit of a segment from what Ben's line of thought was on that particular subject. That's a pretty interesting point of view, because then is oftentimes where we would refer to what the Japanese meta is in comparison to the Western, you know, Eastern versus Western. What a lot of people sometimes don't put into perspective is that the Japanese sets are oftentimes 3 months before ours, or even up to 4. So they would oftentimes have a whole format before us to get to play with the cards. In Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a bit different since they have a whole entirely different battle list and a different ruling system, so then it also influences a little bit of how the meta is going to look. But being informed as to what potential meta can be in a different format can oftentimes lend a bit of aid to figuring out what is good in your current one. That's a good perspective, Ben. I like that. I'll keep that in mind. Alright, so then we're off to Daniel.
Not all the time, but having credentials does help be a case sometimes. In my group of friends, I'm the most accomplished player, though some of my friends are a little bit better or at my level. But I'm not the best when it comes to understanding the meta. Thank God for Solemn Vanguard, cause some of my friends take more time following the Japanese meta than I do. Obviously, I'm working on it, cause every competitive player needs to. But I can't say that I'm the best. My accomplishments sometimes give what I say about a meta a bit more weight, if you know what I mean.
Alright, and that was Daniel with a very interesting point from his own personal experience. He tries to say that there's oftentimes we're blindly listening to somebody who's probably not too informative or doesn't really have much in terms of winnings or terms of tops, can oftentimes shove conversations into a particular direction which would illuminate the discussion. People try to not want to abuse that type of power. Oftentimes that can lead to those scenarios where a lot of discussions will just come down to a straight up pissing contest. So that's something you need to watch out for. But I like that idea where you can have a group of friends that oftentimes can know a lot more than you do. Oftentimes you have a friend that knows a little bit more about rulings in comparison to you do. And oftentimes just topping an event, just like what Ben says, doesn't necessarily mean that you are automatically the better player. Oftentimes it helps to have a bit of feedback from a lot of friends around you. So, off to Mohammed.
I have credentials, and I'll be the first to say it doesn't mean much. I'm more interested in reasons and discussion. Sharing ideas is what makes players become better at the game, and trying to analyze and delve deeper. Simply looking at statistics, especially those that aren't very representative, but not looking into why, is a trap so many people fall into. Why did X deck become popular? And don't limit it to reasons like, oh, it must be too OP, because sometimes it's because it's an easy deck to discover, a counter to decks people keep seeing at their locals or published tournament results. Most Japanese, by the way, and all kinds of reasons. People with credentials could easily not have made it into top and have been one game off, others screwed by tiebreaker, i.e. Worlds, second Susanoo deck, similar to my build, being screwed out to Germany top 8, which no one knows about, etc, etc. Then you consider the best of one increases variance, and some players have cheated to tops.
Okay, Muhammad posed a very interesting idea, because then there's a lot of times where people just blindly follow the meta and not really try to figure out why that deck won or how did he even get there. Could be a possibility that the player probably had a hot streak, or if there was a scenario where he just ended up bumping out somebody who probably was a better matchup, or his opponent bricked or something like that. Those are very interesting variants, and with Vanguard we have a best of one format in a lot of our competitive tournaments, or a lot of our competitive tournaments, and that oftentimes can create scenarios where you can be great stuck, and great stuck is meaning that you can't really progress until you level up, more or less, and those can oftentimes be bricks. Or in Yu-Gi-Oh! You can end up drawing 2 Garnets and 3 Brilliant Fusions, or end up drawing all your combo pieces and you have no starters or extenders. And those type of scenarios can put a lot of perspective of what potentially can lead to somebody being able to top to an event. And I like his humility that he has, that he doesn't really, stopping doesn't really stand for much. It's usually using the facts and informations as to why a deck did so well can oftentimes lend more opinion than just saying, oh, this deck is good just because it's better than all the other decks. There's a lot of scenarios that can happen that could probably make a best deck, or it could be a good deck for that event. Just like in YCS Atlanta just this weekend, where a DDD deck, or Pendulum Magician Splash DDD, or whatever you want to call it, was able to bubble the event, maybe depending on matchups or depending on game scenarios. Being able to play 12 hours of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is straight up woo. It's straight up exhausting. So it can put a lot in perspective as to scenarios why a potential contender can end up being a top event. So it's a good thing to look after. So on to Anthony.
Obviously, the person in the right is the person who makes the better argument, and the person that has the better theoretical knowledge. There's plenty of players who've topped a few times who don't know what they're talking about at all. Blindly listening to whoever has more credentials is basically admitting that you're not good enough at the game or at thinking logically. To consider the validity of people's ideas based on their arguments alone.
Okay, Andy, I think I can get where you're getting at. Using basic argumentation as to why a card is better than another one, where a lot of people were on the fence about Pot of Desires, which is a card that allows you banish 10 to the top of your deck and draw 2 cards, but you net a +1, but a lot of people didn't really see it as that. They saw it as a neg for a very long time, and they were very adamant not to playing it, but everybody's universally now a bit on a bandwagon that, hey, this is a pretty good card. You might not want to play it in every deck, but it's still a pretty decent card if you want to extend your plays, or if you want to get started if you have a pretty crappy hand. and using that with theory instead of just using credentials to just have a pissing contest can oftentimes just lend itself a lot better in terms of an argument. And blindly following somebody usually dictates that you have very little understanding of knowing how the game works, that you need to blindly follow somebody instead of, you know, figuring out what works for yourself. But then don't forget, Anthony, that there's a lot of players who are just starting the game, who don't understand how it works, and oftentimes would need to listen to the better players. And oftentimes the better players are the ones who are like Patrick Hoban, Jeff Jones, or Luba Chen, or any of the other very good players in their respective card games. So oftentimes those can create scenarios where you get a lot of sheeping, I guess. And there's a lot of people who are adamantly not in favor of sheeping. I'm designing and building different decks that are saying like, oh, I play spirals with 13 main deck spiral cards, and ifs and maybes that those things might happen, or I play a blaster deck with stand triggers in it or something. just joking. The stand trigger and blasters was a very innovative ideology, and that's a very good example of that. The worst competitor for all you non-Vanguard players played a deck that should not, or theoretically should not have won the event, but as a very out-of-the-box idea that took everybody by surprise and ended up winning it all. So that goes to show a very good example as to why theory is oftentimes better than just blindly following. Good. Alright, and then on to Magnus.
There can be a multitude of reasons why someone hasn't topped, or why someone has topped, but I would definitely lean a bit more towards a player with results, especially if they top with the deck in question. However, you should never take any theory for granted until you've actually tried it yourself.
Alright, that kind of ties into what I was talking about when Mohammed was talking about how oftentimes what can happen or any given scenarios, or what could be a different perspective on that. And I think on the comment when I took this from, that a commenter also said that some of the reasons could be time, transportation, oftentimes probably the player has to work, weekends aren't good for them, they're probably working in the food industry, and oftentimes when they're free, their friends are working, and when they're working, their friends are free, and it's very hard for them to find any time to make it to any of these events, even if they passionately love the game. And those can be very weird scenarios where oftentimes some of the best players could be the ones who probably didn't make it the weekend, or probably the people who probably thought of the best idea for the deck, or probably end up being sick. So those are very interesting scenarios why transportation is a very important part in any card game, of being able to make it to anywhere that you want to. Like maybe being able to travel to Bochum because it is a very convenient way to travel there with open transportation, and maybe with car as well, where it can be very more cumbersome for other people that they would probably need to travel via plane to get there, you know, and those type of people might not have the budget to get it. So I mean, those are very interesting perspectives. I did not really cue in on that until I read the comment, and I was like, well, that could be possible, that those type of things where there's some regions even in Europe that a lot of players don't even have a regional yet. They might have a locals of maybe 5 players, and probably one of the players, probably one of the better players, but they just can't make it to any events, and they love the game a lot, but they just can't end up getting to play. And there's a lot of type of players who can go on years and not really fulfill any role in the community, and that's pretty unfortunate. That's pretty unfortunate, but that is part of life, unfortunately. And I guess he also adds on to say that, and also when he was adding on to say that the players that oftentimes are topping with a deck in question would oftentimes have more information, and as long as they eloquently explain themselves a lot more solidly, you could probably listen to those type of players, and that's pretty okay, as long as you know what you're talking about. I think that's the very common theme with a lot of these comments that I took so far, that when I was reading them, is that they all come up to in essence, is that you need to know what you're talking about, in essence. It's a common sense. It sounds like it's common sense. It does sound like it. But as oftentimes that common sense can kind of, go over people's head. This is the common sense, and you just kind of skipping right over that. But thank you guys. You guys have been awesome. Actually, the two people that commented, the one Mohammed and Ben is actually a YouTuber. And I'll put his YouTube in the doobly-doo. And I will also be also posting down Solemn's YouTube channel also in the description below. But most of you guys probably know him already as well. And then there is also Mohammed. He was the German winner of our regionals of 2017, and he was a world competitor as well this year. So I did not pick them for nothing. I was not trying to be biased, is that their arguments was relatively solid to giving different perspectives of the spectrum, and I liked listening to their ideologies. And a lot of other comments they took as well was apart from the Yu-Gi-Ohs as well, and they also give some very good feedback as well. So if you want to, I can put some of those in the description below so you guys can take a look at it, what they said, and you guys can also give your feedback. And if I misinterpreted any of my feedback that I gave on this, don't forget to put that in the description below as well. So be awesome, guys, stay awesome, and have a wonderful day. Till next time.